I stood alone at the altar on my wedding day when my entire family didn't show up. Then I saw their beach vacation photos posted during my ceremony and realized what they had done. Should I ever forgive them? My name is Amelia, and I never imagined I'd be standing at the altar without my parents. Growing up, I always assumed they'd walk me down the aisle, smiling proudly, while my sister Clara stood beside me as my maid of honor. But on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, I stood there alone. No texts, no calls, nothing. The morning of my wedding started like any other bride's, full of nervous excitement and anticipation. The makeup artist arrived early, along with my bridesmaids, all friends, no family. I kept checking my phone, hoping to see a message from my parents or Clara. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m., and by noon, my stomach was in knots. Has anyone heard from my family? I asked my bridesmaids, trying to sound casual despite the growing anxiety in my chest. They exchanged uncomfortable glances before my best friend, Olivia, spoke up. I've tried calling Clara twice. It goes straight to voicemail. I nodded, swallowing hard as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was dressed in ivory lace, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, but her eyes held a fear I couldn't disguise. Where were they? My family had RSVP'd months ago. We'd talked about wedding details for weeks. My mother had even helped choose the venue, and Clara had attended my final dress fitting just 2 weeks earlier. By 1:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the ceremony, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called my father again, straight to voicemail. My mother, same result. Clara, nothing. My aunt, my cousins, even my grandparents, not a single family member was answering. Maybe there was an accident, Olivia suggested gently, squeezing my shoulder. Maybe they're all together and something happened. I nodded, clinging to that explanation because the alternative was too painful to consider. Maybe they were stuck in terrible traffic. Maybe someone had fallen ill. Maybe. But deep down, a voice whispered the truth I wasn't ready to face. They weren't coming. And they hadn't even bothered to tell me. When the wedding coordinator poked her head in to say it was time, I took a deep breath and looked at my bridesmaids, friends who had shown up, who had always shown up. We're walking down with you, Olivia declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. All of us. Behind the chapel doors, my fiancé Liam was waiting. He noticed my unease immediately, his eyes scanning the area behind me for my missing family. They're not coming, I whispered, my voice breaking slightly. I don't know why. His jaw tightened, eyes flashing with an anger he quickly controlled for my sake. They'll regret this, he whispered back, squeezing my hand as we waited for the music to begin. The look on the wedding guests' faces as I walked down the aisle without my parents was almost unbearable. Confusion, pity, awkwardness. Liam's parents, sitting in the front row where mine should have been, looked both confused and supportive. The empty chairs reserved for my family seemed to scream their absence with every step I took. Every footfall echoed louder in my ears than the wedding march. Each step down that aisle felt like walking through quicksand, heavy and threatening to pull me under. But Liam's eyes never left mine, and the warmth in them was like a lifeline. When I reached him, he whispered, "You look beautiful. I love you." For a moment, I nearly forgot everything. Nearly. Throughout the ceremony, I found myself wondering if something terrible had happened. Were my parents okay? Was there an accident? I said I do, while part of me was still imagining hospital rooms and police cars, creating scenarios that would explain their absence. The reception was beautiful but surreal. Guests carefully avoided mentioning my family, creating a bubble of artificial normalcy that felt like walking on eggshells. Liam stayed close, his hand rarely leaving mine, as if he could physically anchor me through the storm. "Are you okay?" he asked during our first dance, his eyes searching mine. "I will be," I promised, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince him or myself. By the time we made it to our hotel suite that night, exhaustion had settled into my bones. I kicked off my heels and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the weight of the day to crash over me. Should I try calling them again? I asked Liam, who was loosening his tie. Let's check social media first, he suggested carefully. Maybe there's something there. I nodded, reaching for my phone. As I scrolled through Instagram, my heart suddenly stuttered to a stop. My thumb froze over the screen, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Amelia? What is it? Liam asked, noticing my expression. I couldn't speak. I just turned the phone toward him, showing him what I'd found. There it was, a photo my mom had posted 2 hours earlier, right in the middle of our wedding reception. My entire family smiling at the beach. My parents, Clara, my aunts, uncles, even my grandparents, all of them on a beach, holding cocktails and wearing matching Family First t-shirts. The caption read, "Family over everything. No stress, just peace. Victory hand, #family vacation, #no stress zone." I stared at the photo, my hands trembling uncontrollably. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't been in an accident. They were on vacation. Check Clara's page, Liam said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I clicked on my sister's profile and found a boomerang video of them all doing a group cheers, cocktail glasses clinking. Her caption read, "Better than a wedding. Tropical drink, #family time, #beach vibes." My heart didn't just break, it shattered. They had chosen this. They had planned it. On purpose. They had deliberately chosen to celebrate something else without me on my wedding day. Liam looked over my shoulder and froze. They ditched your wedding for this? His voice was barely a whisper, disbelief etched in every syllable. I nodded, tears finally falling after I'd held them back all day. Why wouldn't they just tell me? The comments made it worse. My cousin Jason had written, "Best decision ever. Weddings are so fake." My mom had replied, "Right? We dodged a drama bullet." Clara had added, "Good vibes only." Raising hands. They had turned my wedding day into a private joke. A family inside joke where I was the punchline. I sat there in silence, feeling the sting of a betrayal I hadn't even imagined possible. My own family had turned their backs on me, and for what? To sit on a beach and pretend I didn't exist? I didn't call them. I didn't text. I just shut down, staring at the wall as tears silently tracked down my cheeks, ruining the makeup I'd worn for my wedding photos. Liam sat beside me, pulling me close. "You're not alone in this anymore," he whispered into my hair. "You have me. You'll always have me." In that moment, on the night that should have been filled with joy and celebration, I realized something profound. Liam wasn't just my husband. He was my family now. The only family that had shown up when it mattered. The next morning, after a night of fitful sleep, we decided to post a few wedding photos. Just the two of us. No big captions, no passive-aggressive comments, just me in my dress, smiling softly next to Liam in his suit. We didn't tag anyone, but people started to notice and ask questions. My parents' friends began commenting, "Where were you all? Why weren't you at the wedding?" Then the messages started coming in. First from my aunt, then my cousin, and finally, my mother. Her text read simply, "Are you trying to embarrass us?" That message lit something inside me. I had been hurt, confused, and humiliated, but now I was angry. They didn't show up to my wedding, they posted vacation photos during my ceremony, and now they were upset because people were asking questions. I stared at the text for what felt like hours before finally replying. Embarrassed? Imagine how I felt walking down the aisle alone. No response. Then Liam's phone buzzed. It was Clara. She had messaged him instead of me. "Tell Amelia to stop making this a public thing. It's over. Move on." That was it. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I took a deep breath, opened Instagram, and wrote a short, honest caption under one of our wedding photos. I waited at the altar for my parents and sister to arrive. They didn't. I thought something terrible had happened. Turns out they were on a beach vacation. I wish they had told me beforehand instead of pretending I didn't exist. But I still said I do to the man who chose me, stood by me, and never made me feel invisible. Within an hour, the post blew up. Friends, extended relatives, even some of my coworkers began commenting and sharing support. I didn't post it for revenge. I posted it because I needed to be heard after being silenced for so long. That night, my phone erupted. Clara called. I ignored it. Then my dad called. Then my mom. All ignored. My phone buzzed nonstop, 34 missed calls, 67 messages. My parents were panicking. They'd been exposed, not by drama, but by simple truth. My father's voicemail stung the most. You've embarrassed this family, Amelia. We have our reasons. You just don't understand. I saved every message, every screenshot, every voice note. Liam, ever the voice of calm, said, "Let them reveal themselves. Don't stoop to their level." I nodded, but part of me wanted answers. I needed to understand how the people who were supposed to love me most could hurt me so deliberately. So I decided to give them one chance to explain. 3 days later, we met at a local cafe. My parents, Clara, and I, Liam, waited in the car, giving me space, but staying close enough if I needed him. My mom looked pale. My dad avoided eye contact. Clara wore sunglasses indoors like we were in some dramatic movie scene. My mom started, "Amelia, we didn't mean to hurt you." I cut her off immediately. "You posted your vacation photos while I was walking down the aisle alone." My dad sighed heavily, like I was being difficult. "It's complicated. We didn't approve of the wedding." Clara added, "You've always been so distant, Amelia. You didn't even involve us in the planning." I laughed bitterly. "I sent you the invites. I asked for your help. You never responded." Their expressions shifted, caught in their own contradictions. My father muttered, "We thought if we stayed away, you'd realize how much you needed us." I stared at them, incredulous. "You skipped my wedding to teach me a lesson?" Clara folded her arms defensively. "You've always been cold to us." It felt fake to show up and pretend otherwise. I nodded slowly, a calm settling over me that I hadn't expected. "That's fair. You don't have to pretend anymore. But don't expect to be part of my life moving forward." My mom gasped dramatically. "We're your family." I looked at her squarely, no tears, no wavering. "You were. But family doesn't treat each other like they don't matter." And I left. Back in the car, I cried in Liam's arms. Not because I regretted what I said, but because I had finally said it. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't cold or distant. I was just tired of begging to be seen. Liam whispered, "You were brave, and I'm so proud of you." Later that week, my parents tried to call again, this time to apologize. Clara messaged me long paragraphs trying to explain, but I didn't answer. I wasn't trying to punish them. I was just finally choosing peace, and that meant keeping distance from people who only showed up when it suited them. The days turned into weeks. I returned to work, Liam and I started looking at houses, and slowly, the wedding incident became something we mentioned less and less. Not because it hurt less, but because we were building something new that deserved more attention than old wounds. A month later, I received a letter in the mail. Actual handwritten mail, not a text or email. It was from my grandmother. She'd seen everything online, she wrote. She apologized for not knowing what was happening and promised to always be there for me. She explained that she'd been told by my parents that I had uninvited them all, that I wanted a small wedding with just friends. She believed them until she saw my post. I cried reading her letter, not because it fixed everything, but because someone cared enough to reach out sincerely, to bridge the gap without excuses. I invited her over for tea the following weekend. We talked for hours about everything, my childhood, my relationship with my parents, her own regrets about not seeing the dynamic sooner. Some families lose sight of what matters, she told me, her weathered hands holding mine, but you don't have to carry their mistakes forever. Those words stayed with me. I may have lost a few people on my wedding day, but I gained clarity and real love from Liam, from friends who stood beside me, and from my grandmother who chose truth over comfort. Liam and I printed our wedding photos a few weeks later. Just the two of us, framed in golden sunlight, smiling like we'd made it through a storm. We displayed them in our new home. No missing faces, no guilt, just truth. When people asked what happened with my family, I simply said they had other plans. The silence that followed always said enough. I never told them they were uninvited from future milestones, but they knew. Some things, once broken, stay broken, and I wasn't interested in gluing shattered glass just so it looked whole again. Eventually, they stopped calling, stopped texting, and honestly, life got better. Liam and I planned a honeymoon to Italy. We invited close friends and the few family members who had stood by us, my grandmother, an uncle who had called to check on me after seeing my post, a cousin who had always been kind. The trip was beautiful, filled with warmth, laughter, and wine. I didn't think about my parents much, or Clara, until I saw a new post from my mom while scrolling through Instagram one evening in our hotel room in Florence. It was a quote image. Some people cut off their families and call it growth. I smiled to myself, feeling a strange peace wash over me. Growth is cutting off dead branches so you can breathe. And I was finally blooming. 6 months after the wedding, we learned I was pregnant. The joy I felt was pure, untainted by worry about how my family would react. Liam and I celebrated with a small dinner party, friends, his parents, my grandmother. "Are you going to tell them?" Liam asked one night as we lay in bed, his hand resting gently on my still flat stomach. I considered the question seriously. Not yet, I decided. Maybe someday, but not yet. I didn't want my child to grow up without grandparents, but I also didn't want them to grow up feeling like they had to earn love. I wanted better for them than what I had experienced. As my pregnancy progressed, my grandmother became a regular visitor, bringing homemade food and sharing stories about our family that I'd never heard before. Stories that helped me understand my parents a little better, though they didn't excuse their actions. "Your mother always felt she had to compete for attention," she told me one afternoon. "And your father, well, he follows her lead in everything. Always has." It didn't heal the wound, but it gave it context. When my daughter was born, pink and perfect with Liam's eyes and my chin, I felt a completeness I hadn't known was possible. As I held her in my arms, I realized something profound. I had broken the cycle. She would grow up loved, seen, celebrated, not as an extension of someone else's ego, but as herself. We named her Elise, after Liam's grandmother. My own grandmother wept when she met her, this tiny continuation of a family line that had nearly severed completely. "She's beautiful," she whispered, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "You did good, Amelia." 3 months after Elise was born, I received a text from Clara. No drama, no accusations, just a simple message. "I heard I have a niece. Congratulations." I stared at the phone for a long time before responding, "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was acknowledgement. A tiny bridge across a canyon that had seemed uncrossable. Today my life is full of people who show up, who love without conditions, who don't need to be begged to care. Liam and I have been married for 2 years now. Elise is walking, talking, bringing joy into every room she enters. Do I wish things had been different with my parents? Sometimes. But I also know this. I walked down that aisle by myself, but I didn't walk alone. I carried strength. I carried peace. And I carried the quiet knowledge that I deserved better. Better than guilt. Better than silence. Better than a family that never saw me. Because I see myself now. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.